Let me just welcome everybody in here, and this is our fourth keynote of the iMoot. So we've got Dr. Iain Doherty with us today, who's the Director of E-Learning Pedagogical Support Unit at Hong Kong University. And I've had the privilege to see Iain on a few times, present live, at the Hong Kong Moodle Moot last year. It was actually the last time I saw him. Suffice to say, Iain knows his stuff. He really has got a great insight into e-learning and I guess that whole bigger picture thing and how it affects the students and just the whole organisation. So it's always great hearing his perspective on things. And I just do want to say on behalf of the iMoot team, Iain, thank you for giving your time to us, sharing your thoughts on your topic today. So I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Shane. Look, as you know, always glad to do it and to be able to participate. And thank you for the invite to be talking at the iMoot. So there we are. You can see the title, Moodle in the World of MOOCs, What Might the Future Look Like? I guess those of you who are watching the educational news will have seen that Hong Kong U has actually just signed with edX. The announcement went out, I think, 2 days ago to the university. At the same time, obviously, Moodle is the LMS platform of choice within the University of Hong Kong. So the things I'm talking to you about today are not abstract things for me. In fact, if I think too deeply about them, they're actually quite scary things because in the end, I'm going to be the person responsible, I guess, at an operational level for putting these MOOC courses together along with my team and obviously in conjunction with the subject experts. So last time I was doing this at the iMoot, it was all a little bit abstract. Now it's kind of crikey over the next year. I'm going to have to put into practice some of the things that I think about deeply. And I guess what you're going to get from me today is some of the things that I think about reasonably deeply. So let me just flick on there. Let me just, I guess, give you a little bit of an overview of the structure of today's talk. So, you know, if you want to pop out for coffee, you can see when's the best time to be doing that. So I'm going to talk to you about massive open online courses. And look, in doing this, I'm going to take a stand today. Normally I don't. People who know me very well know that I kind of tend to look at things from multiple perspectives and not in the end always come down on the side of a choice. But today I'm going to. So I'm going to make a categorization of MOOCs, and it's one that I haven't seen at the moment in the literature around MOOCs. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to talk to you about standard learning theories and standard technologies without spending too much time on that, but I'll be building a picture, I think, from what might MOOCs mean to what have we been doing. I'm going to take a stand around connectivism, because the more that I get involved in it, and I hasten to add, I'm not an expert in connectivism. So if anybody out there is a great fan of Siemens and Downs and has read the recent ebook that Stephen Downs put out that runs to about 1,000 pages, you know a lot more than I do. But what I am is taken by connectivism and by the experimentation that goes on around it. So I'll talk to you a little bit about that. And then I'll come on to Moodle. So look, I'm not going to apologize, but I will explain. Yes, it's an iMoot. Whenever I'm involved in teaching with technologies, I have this 80-20 rule. I'll spend 80% of the time thinking about the teaching, and I'll spend 20% of my time thinking about what are the affordances of the technology that can enable good teaching. So my talk today is probably representative of that fact. But I hope what it will do for you, I guess, is to provide a big picture framework for all of you who, and I'm sure there's a lot of you out there who know an awful lot more about Moodle than I do, and who teach with it far more frequently than I do. But I hope it puts a framework around what's happening for you, perhaps what might be happening with Moodle development, what might all of this mean for Moodle, and indeed by extension any LMS, I think, as we move forward in the educational landscape. So Look, if you were at the iMoot, sorry, yes, if you were at the Moot, sorry, in Hong Kong last year, you would have heard this anecdote. But if you weren't, I like telling it because there's nothing like a 15-year-old girl to really bring you down to earth and to give you a kind of reality in your perspective. So this was, my partner's got a 15-year-old daughter, and obviously I left New Zealand. I'd been there for 10 years, and I came over to Hong Kong to get a job. And as 15-year-olds do, you know, she realized this probably about a month after I'd left, and I went back to New Zealand after about 3 months. And eventually she said to me, so, you know, why did you go to Hong Kong? And I said, well, I got a really good job. I'm director of e-learning for the University of Hong Kong, and I just got this, like, you know, 15-year-old face. And at first I thought I hadn't been sufficiently impressive, so I said, well, I became an associate professor, and that's just blank, nothing. And then she said to me, what's e-learning? I kid you not. So I'd realized it was actually just, you know, completely different worlds that we were living in. So I tried explaining to her and saying, well, it's, you know, it's about video and audio and images and media and instructional design, and 15-year-old face again. So in the end I said, it's Moodle. And she went, really, Moodle, that's your job. Moodle's rubbish. Okay, so the reason I tell that is I then kind of quizzed her afterwards, and I was asking why. And in fact, it's not the case that Moodle's rubbish. It's the fact that it was being used very poorly in the school context in which she was in. And that's always, it's prompted me, I think, it's brought a degree of realism to a lot of the things I think about, the things that I know about the way in which LMSs are used. But I think my thoughts now are probably going even further or more to the extreme in terms of the extent to which the educational landscape is changing, and what this might mean for the Moodle's rubbish, but it's not scenario. It just has been used poorly, as have a lot of LMSs. So there's some background thinking. When I do this to a live audience, I know they're laughing, so that's nice, but you know, losing something in audio and video. Okay, let me just stop. And is there any way for us to get an indication? Yeah, so we're okay. All right, let me continue, but if you're having issues, please use the chat function, because I don't want to keep talking if some of you are losing me. So the realistic kind of background and context, I guess. So arguably, I'd say not even arguably, massive open online courses are the most talked about and potentially most disruptive phenomenon in the current educational landscape. And, you know, being the guy who's going to be responsible at an operational level for MOOCs, I've been reading an awful lot about them, both in research papers and through the social media and the more, I guess you'd call popular, in inverted commas, online magazines and articles. And what you come across is this notion that they provide an impetus for institutions to reflect upon their teaching and learning and to reflect upon their e-learning practices. And I'm not sure what I make of that at the moment. I would say, yes, they could. They could provide an opportunity. They could even provide a driver. Whether or not that happens in reality, I think, is a very different question. And I think it differs across the different sorts of institutions, and it will be interesting to see how this plays out. And I will play this out throughout my talk. But if, for example, you look at the Open University in the UK at the moment, they've already got a position paper on MOOCs. And the reason for that is it's really quite a significant threat for them. They have to think about it very hard, and it's not something they can afford to sit back and wait to think about, so they're already doing it. Of course, they have their comparable offerings. Whereas when you look at somewhere like the University of Hong Kong, or you look at some of the top research universities around the world, the impetus may not be the same to think deeply about the teaching and learning practices. Again, if you look, I think, and you went over, and I've heard somebody from the UK say this, the middle tier to lower tier universities in the UK are worried because the fees there are very, very high at £9,000 per year. And if the MOOC movement goes in one direction, which would be to offer a quality education, that could cause concern, as it could in the States. So there are lots of big questions around MOOCs. I think if we're going to think about this seriously, and if we're going to think, okay, what do MOOCs mean and how can they help us to reflect on our teaching and learning practices, then we need to understand the different sorts of MOOCs. And again, this is all going to build into what is the place of the LMS. So I ask you to bear with me as we go through. If we look at the moment at as I said, the research papers and the more popular papers, you'll see the basic distinction between CMOOCs and XMOOCs. CMOOCs being the connectivist ones, a la Downs and Siemens, and XMOOCs being the excellent MOOCs as self-designated by the Ivy League universities, I guess. So let me just delve into these a little deeper. CMOOCs, Connectivist Learning Theory, first proposed by Siemens. Do you know, I don't know with Big Blue Button whether there's a little voting system. That would be nice, because you could tick and say, yes, I know about connectivism, and I could get an indication. I'm not going to go into it into great detail. People who know me know I'm actually a philosopher. It's where I started. So connectivism fascinates me, and then I stopped myself from going down that route. But what I would say is, if you wanted to do it in a nutshell, anyone from my session knows, excellent. Let me say that learning is a network process and course content is generated by teachers, students, other nodes in the network. Now I know that's simplistic, but I don't want to go down the route of exploring in great depth what connectivism is. The other kind of interesting aspect of this, I think, is that the connectivist MOOCs employ multiple technologies. So George Siemens' first one, there were 12 in it. Including an LMS, and interestingly, I'm going to come back to this, Moodle was the LMS that was used in Siemens' first MOOC. I just want to say here, the term MOOC was first applied to the thing that Siemens did. He didn't conceive of it in that way, but somebody came up with the term. Sorry, I can't remember the name off the top of my head. So there we are. And this is where I'm taking, a stand, I guess. I think if we're really looking for innovation in pedagogy and technology use, this is where we look. Now this is the categorization, I guess, that I'm adding. I think when I look around at what's happening across the MOOC space, I'm going to say that there is something called a standard MOOC or an SMOOC. And these are grounded in very traditional pedagogies, predominantly behaviorist, smattering of cognitivism and constructivism. So a lot of transmission teaching, a lot of multiple choice, and perhaps a use of a discussion board or something like that as a nod to constructivism. The reason I'm bringing this up, and again, bear in mind that in the end we're looking at what's the future of the LMS if we're looking in the MOOC context. In this, I want to say that the MOOC platform is simply operating as a massive LMS or an LMS on a large scale. And what we're seeing, I hesitate to say it, is a repetition of some of the poor practices that we've seen in the uptake of the learning management system, which we had around for 10 years within universities. Please do not misunderstand me to say that all uses of the learning management system are poor, or indeed that the LMS or any Moodle in particular is poor. It is how it's used, but I think one could make the case that what we're seeing with some of these MOOCs, and I'm going to name Coursera, and Simon Ung, who's the founder of Coursera, is an alumni of the University of Hong Kong. We've been in and had a look at them, and I've done a lot of research around the literature. I'm going to say they're SMOOCs or standard MOOCs. All right, they're the LMS repeated on a grand scale. Let's get to the XMOOCs. Now they are self-designated. Excellent, exploratory, expansive MOOCs or XMOOCs aspire to innovating in pedagogical practices and the use of technologies for teaching and learning. Now look, me and my team have been in, my team and I, that's very poor English, my team and I have been in and we've looked at some Coursera and we've looked at some edX, which is the two that we were focusing on in the context of HKU. Admittedly limited. I mean, how many MOOCs can you look at in a relatively short space of time? But I think what we would say at the moment is that in practice, perhaps the pedagogies and the use of technologies that we're seeing between what I'm calling SMOOCs and these self-designated XMOOCs. Not too different, but the trajectory, it's interesting. If you look at the website for edX as compared with the one for Coursera, the stated philosophy and the trajectories are very different. So I am saying, if edX heads down the path that they are espousing, we would see a very different kind of MOOC. And I mean that in terms of the pedagogies and the use of the technologies. Let me just pause for 1 sec to look at the chat. Still boils down to the charisma of the presenter. Can't beat him. I've read a lot about that in the MOOC literature, and I would say to you, I think if we think about pedagogies and we think about teaching, how are we doing it? And if it's transmission, perhaps it does rest on, to a very large degree, on the charisma of the presenter. But if we conceive of teaching in different ways, then perhaps the charisma of the teacher is not as important. I would say to you, it's probably not as important in a connectivist MOOC as it would be in an edX type MOOC or in a Coursera MOOC. So let me move on, but I am a very relaxed presenter, so if you've got, if you have questions or comments, put them up and I'll talk to them. So I briefly touched on this earlier. I'm going to say it's time to take a stand with respect to teaching and technologies. I'm going to say the most innovative MOOCs are in fact the CMOOCs run by Siemens and others. He's not the only one running those kinds of MOOCs. I'm going to say we can learn a lot from these MOOCs in terms of teaching approach. And most importantly, I think one of the things I admired about Siemens, it doesn't matter whether you agree with him or not, it doesn't matter what you think about connectivism. What you see when you look at Siemens and others is they are living their pedagogy in their use of technologies. But you can fundamentally disagree with it, I think, with connectivism, but you've got to admit there is a constructive alignment between their thinking and their doing, and for me that's a good thing. Yeah, so any institution, let me throw it out there, it's a keynote, so I should say bold and bright things that people can disagree with. Throw it out there. I think any institution, apart from probably the one George is at or his previous one, is going to have to think very, very hard if they were going to offer any type of connectivist MOOC. I think the pedagogy and the use of technology would be so far away from current practice that the challenges would be enormous. Let me state now, to keep your interest in Moodle and the LMS, Moodle will be there, right? But what I want to do in this keynote, I guess, is play it out and to give you that context for thinking about how will it be there and what would the development path be for Moodle that might give it a more central place. Okay. Sue, disaster. Sorry, I'm hoping that this keynote isn't a disaster and that refers to something else that was going on. Oh, thank goodness. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sue. I'm going to now make a case around learning theories going into why we need to change and then on to technologies. Does this not, for the Coursera course, not you, thank you. Does this not astonish you in the audience that education has operated for decades in terms of three learning theories? It's behaviorist cognitivism, behaviorism, cognitivism, or constructivism. I always quote this paper from 1998. I think it was from a graduate student in the States. And there they are. They were the three that were quoted. If I go to a reputable journal in educational technologies these days, and I'm by no means berating these people, but go to the Australian Journal of Educational Technology when social media was all the rage, and there were endless papers in there on wikis and social constructivism. Now, yes, a good thing in and of itself, but the world has changed massively, absolutely massively. Damn hard to discover connectivism. Is it hard to discover or hard to understand? The world has changed, incredibly so. And Yet at the same time that the LMS is still predominantly used for text transmission. There are three longitudinal studies, the States, Australia and the UK, that shows this. Our own stats at the University of Hong Kong show this, that by far the greatest use is to transmit text with, again, some nod to the cognitivist and constructivist components. This is why, oh God, I'm coming off sounding like a George Siemens fan. Oh, is that a bad thing? I don't know. I just like this quote because it encapsulates very succinctly, I think, why knowledge, the nature of knowledge, should be a driver within our institutions. Understanding knowledge in a particular era is important in terms of ensuring that we have aligned our spaces and our structures with the nature of our knowledge. George has a tendency to be a bit esoteric. That's terribly familiar. I don't know George very well. He has a tendency to be esoteric. But imagine we sit in, let's imagine University A, and we sit inside it and we teach to our students in a lecture format with some group work, and we use an LMS. Now let's imagine company A or health service A or whatever it happens to be, and the way in which systems are utilized there, the way in which students go about gathering their knowledge, recycling their knowledge, storing their knowledge. What George is saying basically, I think, is that there is a disjoint. That the way in which knowledge is now acquired, circulated, stored, etc., is really quite different from the way in which we might think in universities. I'm not sure whether you'll agree with that or not, and it is a broad brushstroke statement, but I think that there's an element of truth in it as well. The nature of student as driver. I don't think I have to spend too long on this. It's something that we all know about as a learner. The 15, 16-year-olds who are coming into our institutions, they're always connected to something or someone. Anecdotally, you wander around the University of Hong Kong and you see virtually every single student walking around Facebooking on their phone, but we also know from running a survey that we've got about an 80 to 90% smartphone ownership rate. Accessing multiple sources of information, learning socially with their friends, adept with multiple technologies, highly creative and inventive. I love this one, fascinated by certain things, not by everything, but by certain things, and intermittently engaged with their learning. So as I'm moving forwards and we're thinking about the learning management system, what I'm saying to you is there's nature of knowledge as a driver. I think we really have to seriously consider what is the nature of knowledge generation and consumption these days, and obviously we've got to consider our students as drivers for change. So here's another reasonably succinct quote from Siemens, I suppose, to kind of reiterate. I'm going to read your comments again after this slide. Rapid development of information. It sees learning less as a product, filling a learner with knowledge, and more as a process of continually staying current and connected. Now look, I find this interesting. Again, I think Siemens is very good at throwing comments out there that are very thought-provoking. Let's think about that for a minute. And again, we're balancing pedagogies and systems here, and how do we teach, and what's the place of Moodle. When I go and see my GP, I quite like it that they have knowledge in their heads, right? That's a good thing. So in other words, there is a place for transmission of knowledge, for memorization, for understanding, for storing things in our minds. But I would think of this as, in philosophy terms, you'd call it a stock of knowledge, right? There are basics that everyone needs to know. But what is equally true, and this will go across any profession, I think, is knowledge is increasing exponentially. When I talk to my GP, she will happily admit to me she is connected. She's sitting there. If she doesn't know something, she'll look it up, and trying to keep up with the research in any particular area is difficult. So I think there's a balance here, a kind of midpoint. Let me just stop and read your comments again. Tech. Oh, I'm having to skim back a little bit. PDF comments, teachers, trainers must do. Students are invited to discuss how they perceive their learning. We're talking all the time about teaching. Yes, Jacob Kuhn. Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Let's say nameless institution A instituted an e-learning strategy without surveying students, right? not good. And it would be fascinating, you know, within the context, let's use my context of having implemented an e-learning strategy, to ask different questions from the ones that institutions normally offer for the purposes of quality assurance. Hong Kong, you will ask questions, but it will be ones around, did it help you achieve your learning outcomes? Did it help you to connect with your lecturers? We'll have 4 questions on our student learning experience questionnaire, which is delivered to all students at the end of the first year and end of the 4th year. But there are much broader and deeper questions. My students moan about Moodle. Yeah, they do. Yeah, and I'll get to that right at the end. But the point about the student voice is a very, very important one. Yeah, not throwing teaching at students. Happily, I'm about to bring a slide up that's going to look really, really bad. All right, skip my slide. Doesn't like my image. Don't worry about that. It was basically an image, a final image representing connectivism in terms of relations between nodes in a network. So you've lost nothing by losing the slide, and it's on SlideShare, and I've uploaded it here so you can have a look later. So there we have it, connectivism in a nutshell. That's what we do according to George Siemens. And oh, that's nice, this one came out properly. Why I did this is just to give us a sense. So we're thinking about Moodle, we're thinking about our teaching and learning approaches. Have a look at those. This was a lovely little icon set where a designer for free had put up on the web icons of, I believe, every social media application and service. So I just got lots of them and dotted them around and links and names. People who know me as well know I'm not terribly visual. I'm a logical linear thinker. So for me, this is an amazing diagram, and I've done an awesome job because I have a picture, and that's a good thing. But visually, it just says to me, like, okay, we've got Moodle as an LMS. That's what we use. That's what predominantly what all teachers use here, and very little beyond. And then I look at that and I think, what are all of the other ways, and this is what I guess how Siemens thinks in his head, all the other ways in which people might be connecting with one another. Now, I will lay my cards on the table and say, I love Moodle. Obviously, I think it's great, and I think it's got a real purpose, but I keep flipping in my head to my awesome diagram and thinking about what are all these other ways of connecting and sharing and sourcing and resourcing, and how do these fit into our institutions, and how do they fit into, I guess, a pedagogical approach which sees the LMS as central. Please, if you have an answer to that question, put it down here, because I might have to tell my dean or some, so put it in the chat. So, and then I'll obviously pretend it was mine if it's a really good answer. Google Docs, one part in your personal learning environment. Excellent. I'm going to leave that comment because we're going to get to that. So what do we want to see? Well, a model in which students consume, we want to move away from that in terms of a growing matrix of resources that they select and that they organize. Isn't it funny when, obviously one runs through one's presentation several times to make sure it's fine. Okay, so back to the 15-year-old girl. I'm still laying my cards on the table. I'm going to say, yeah, we can look at them and say they're learning when they connect to multiple sources of information in order to complete learning activities. I'm going to say that that is learning. Contra, and one should be fair, I think. It's not clear that connectivism is a learning theory, and there's certainly at the moment no empirical evidence for its effectiveness or efficacy. But it is saying something very important about the 21st century epistemological or knowledge framework. It's also saying something very important about the ubiquitous nature of technologies, or living in a networked world. So as we move forward with the presentation, I guess the question is, can we navigate to a balanced picture of teaching and technology use? Let me have a little look at Moodle is only the tool in the engine of education. Yeah, Siemens have never claimed it to be a theory. I certainly, I'm not going to take you on that point in any strong way. I thought there was a paper by Siemens that says new learning theory for the digital age. Now that might just be a title. And also, I guess, I thank you for the comment. I wonder what, I'm going to continue in a minute, but I wonder what it has to be if it's going to be taken seriously within the educational framework. In the sense that I understand their kind of ethos and the way in which they go about articulating it, and their fidelity, I think, to what they believe in terms of putting things out there as they think about them. But in the end, I believe that somebody has to take them, if not them. I believe that somebody has to take them and to shape them into something that is a theory that has concepts that then can be put into practice in a reasonably systematized way. So let me say that to you, and thank you for the question. So, let me just skip that one because I think I've said enough on that issue. So, my unit, learning-led and technology-enabled, the 80-20 rule, etc., think pedagogically in the first instance and determine whether the LMS has the features and affordances to meet pedagogical needs. And this is where I think somebody had said in the chat room, well, what if, what's the personal learning environment? I think we're very much heading in that direction, certainly in this talk. And I'll throw this out to you now so that you can think about it as I move forward and make the case for Moodle still being, is the technology mature enough yet, Ian? Let me do this slide and I'll answer that. If course were little more than gateways to course activities, materials became instead course catalysts, open dynamic representations of engagement streams that demonstrate and encourage deep learning. Okay, let me say, as we move forward into this sort of second half, have a think about how student-centric Moodle can really be, because that's the big question, I think, as I go through the next part of my presentation. Is the technology mature enough yet? I think it's such a big question. I go back into my head always to what do we want to achieve. I had a guy here today from an American startup company, Eduora, which is the sort of developing the, he described it this way, the equivalent of kind of LinkedIn and Facebook for the educational space. Now this is a mature product. If we were teaching in a way in which mobile communication through various different functionalities of an app that had Facebook qualities, yeah, I think the technology's there. I honestly believe the problem lies with institutions, and we can look at this across the history of teaching and learning, that educational institutions are very slow to change. And I think the technologies are sitting there, but I don't think the institutions are sufficiently innovative in their teaching to make use of these technologies. And I'd be interested, you can chat away down the right-hand side. And obviously, again, a lot of you are going to know a lot more than me about the application services, etc., that are around. But I think if an institution committed today to, let's say, connectivist pedagogy into making best use of a rich range of apps, yeah, I think they're all sitting there. I really do. The old guard is still controlling as behaviorists. Hong Kong U is, I mean, I've worked at a couple of institutions, I guess, but, and I've chatted to a lot of people, and the guy I was chatting to today was saying, yeah, he encounters the same thing in most institutions. It's a degree, to one degree or another. There's still a deep running conservatism in teaching and learning approaches. But look, to put a positive note on the other side of that, I think we can find innovators, and I think, you know, people like me wouldn't be doing my job if we just thought we were knocking our head. Yeah, it does boil down to the same old problem. And it's, yeah, absolutely. But I wouldn't be doing my job, my staff wouldn't be doing their job if we were just banging our heads against a brick wall. I think the great and rewarding thing is I will be able to go out with this, with these things that I think, and some teachers will take it on board to one degree or another. And I think that's the joy of being, in the roles that I and many of you in the audience will be in. So, somebody was mentioning, I think before in the chat room, about the roles. I think many of you will be familiar with this, but again, if you're saying same old story, that's sage on the stage, so the idea of overcoming the sage on the stage with the guide on the side, that was a 1993 paper. It's 2013, people. The meddler in the middle. Okay, so I like this because I've matched them up. So the sage on the stage, behaviorist with a cognitivist element, guide on the side, so the teacher is in the midst, and you're engaged in much more active learning techniques. Aligns well with constructivism and its variants. And then one day it kind of dawned on me that this idea of the meddler in the middle, who is described as a usefully ignorant co-worker, aligns with the central tenets of connectivism. Because in the end, if you think about connectivism, it's saying that there's so much more out there than any one person could possibly know. Now, I get some academics, teachers might take umbrage at the idea of usefully ignorant co-worker. I'm not that comfortable with it myself. But the notion that the teacher is really somebody who is going to discover along with the students is, I think, a useful and interesting one. Teachers teaching learning, not pushing knowledge. Risk-taking is not something universities do or take naturally. No, it's not. No. Okay, so what I was saying there in the back is, I know I'm covering a lot, but I guess keynotes are about that, breadth and thought. We can think about our teaching roles, and look, it's really not hard to find activities, to find things to do with our students that encourage active learning, that involve active learning techniques, which we know from cognitive psychology is an important thing. Project-based, experiential, case-based, problem-based learning, guided discovery learning, student-led teaching, student presentations, interactive teaching sessions. Now, those of you who are, following my suggestion to keep thinking this through to Moodle can see where I'm going. If I connect, okay, teacher as meddler in the middle, much more they're off the front. They're not even the guide on the side. They're setting up these kinds of activities and acknowledging at the same time a kind of connectivist world, let me say, okay? I'm not going to go further than that right now, but you can see if you're thinking, okay, teacher role, teaching approaches, we're going to obviously bring technology in a minute. How does it come in? From a technological perspective, the LMS, okay, can we think of the LMS as one node in the network? With learners' personal spaces and technologies, as I said, 12 different technologies in Siemens and Down's first MOOC, defining additional nodes in the network. So remember the idea of connectivism. I'm here, I'm a node. My teacher's another node. All my fellow students are other nodes. Experts around the world in any location are other nodes. And interestingly, from this perspective or this understanding, so would databases be nodes, so would websites, etc., etc. Then the learning management system becomes simply one node in a network. Here is an interesting point for you. As far as I can see at the moment, there's little, kind of empirical research around MOOCs. They're quite new, but the papers are starting to come out. I found this one from, actually I've just noticed the date there, 2010, which is interesting because it's about Siemens' first MOOC. And they were looking at the experience of the participants in that MOOC, which was about connectivism. And I told you earlier that Moodle was the LMS that was used. So interestingly, a significant number, I'm not meaning significant there in any statistical sense, but a significant number of the participants favored Moodle as a technology. Why was that the case? I would suggest to you, having read the paper, the participants were a little bit overwhelmed. And what they were overwhelmed by was the range of technologies and I think the freedom of choice. It would be fair to say. What they favored was, let's say, Moodle, in Moodle, learning management system, know where to go, it's structured, good thing. Also the announcements. Now this is kind of paradoxical. So you have connectivism. Now there's George teaching it all, and you have a lot of people there, and they're feeling somewhat disoriented. go back into Moodle, where I shouldn't try and, I can't multitask, I'm a guy, I shouldn't try and read chat and talk. Using Moodle, but the announcements by George favored, okay, because there's an authoritative source. So this is quite interesting if we thought it through. You're going out into quite a challenging paradigm, let's say, but then also we're coming back to a comfort level and a comfort, say, a zone and a level. And there I think we're seeing something interesting going on in terms of the place of Moodle or in any LMS within, let's say, a connectivist MOOC for now. Let me just think if I want to say anything else on that. I think it's not surprising is what I'd say. The leap into a connectivist MOOC would be challenging. It would be challenging for me. I think it would be challenging for a lot of you. And, this is our job, to navigate multiple technologies, to keep up with threads from, literally thousands of people, to try and overcome that sense, and hopefully this is not just me and I'm idiosyncratic or neurotic, that there's all this stuff being generated in a MOOC. Where's the important stuff? How do I know? And I know these questions are getting answered. There are now moderators and rating systems and scoring that's going on, and the higher scored discussion threads will start rising to the top, etc. But even then, it's still, I imagine, quite an overwhelming feeling. All right, so let me now stop and have a little here. Portfolio, interview clients, places that they already knew. Yes, Moodle's a company. Yep. Current tend to be much more distributed. Yeah, thank you for that, Stephen. So that would, thinking about the point that I was just making, I'd be interested, and I don't know the answer to this, and the MOOC I've looked at is that first one. I haven't looked at subsequent MOOCs and whether they're still using the LMS in conjunction with additional technologies. If they were, I'd still like to see where the students, in inverted commas, where are they gravitating towards? What are their preferences around technology? And I think that will be interesting moving forwards in terms of the future of Moodle or any LMS platform in this kind of MOOC space. Yep, existing paradigms and connectivism is quite new. I would absolutely agree with that. A big Moodle MOOC coming up. I'm going to ask you, that's Dot Waterhouse. Is that a C MOOC, an X MOOC, or an S MOOC? Or an M MOOC? Maybe we can have an M MOOC. So this is interesting, I think. This is from one of George's papers where he would say that the LMS is the wrong place to start learning. I don't think he would say it's not needed or superfluous or any of those things. But I like to move through these, and look, all my ticks appeared initially, so now you know the answers. I like to go through these because it gets me to a place where I actually kind of think I see the need, why I see the need to move beyond Moodle or LMSs, or why they perhaps need to be developing more quickly and to be looking at different ways in which they might operate. I don't know, I'm not a developer, but from a end user perspective, I guess I look at it. Are they a place for learner expression? Sure, they've got blogs, wikis, and portfolios. We know we can plug Mahara in and those kind of things. So yeah, people can express, students can express. Can there be content interaction? Yeah, Moodle's very good at that. Even as a non-Moodle expert, I can think of a dozen ways in which students can interact with content. It comes down to good pedagogy, really, and then using the Moodle functions such as the wiki or the book function or the discussion forum or the chat. Or the poll or whatever it happens to be. Is it a place to connect with other learners? Yes, it is. Obviously, I'm not going to run through the Moodle functions. I'm sure you know them. A place to connect with the thoughts of other learners in a personal, meaningful way, for example, using RSS and then brought back into the learner expression tool. Look, if somebody understands that, please type type something in there because I don't. Can you connect with other learners in a personal and meaningful way? Well, perhaps it means that Moodle is often teacher-centric. It is a delivery, and we have formal structures in there, and we have formal ways of communicating, and perhaps the environments we're setting up don't lend themselves to more personal spaces, which is why at Hong Kong U, again, anecdotally, I know 2 big student cohorts who simply jump into Facebook. Is it a place to dialogue with instructors? Yes, it is. We all know that, and we know how. Is it a place to dialogue with gurus? Yes, I would say so. There are plenty of ways, I guess, in which you can bring experts inside of Moodle to be delivering delivering their 1-hour expert lecture or to be interacting with students. And it is a place for learning artifacts. And the reason I list these and tick them, I think, is because I can tick the boxes for an LMS, and yet still at the end of that, I have this kind of little feeling in my stomach that there is something wrong in the bigger scheme of things. So Moodle can provide a structured environment, meddler in the middle, students the option of using a variety of other tools too. So I think for me, what I always come up against inside of Moodle and other learning management systems I've used is that they tend to be teacher-centric, and I don't think that is simply, I know that the use of technologies follows necessarily, in my opinion, or necessarily or obviously from the pedagogical approach. So if you've got a transmission style of teaching and that's how you're using Moodle, then it's obviously not a space that's going to be particularly student-centric. But I think when if I think back to my lovely diagram with all of the social media applications and services that we have around, and I think to all of the sources of information, and obviously I'm back to talking about the connectivist paradigm here, somehow I'm going to say that the LMS is lacking. And I think if we ever got to the point in our mainstream institutions, and that sounded wrong, George is in a mainstream institution, if the majority of our institutions got to the point where they were pushing pedagogy to an extreme, and let's say the extreme's connectivism, it's the only one I know about at the moment that's pushing the boat out, let's say we got to that, I think the LMS would be found wanting. Can I just comment on that for me? Just type a quick yes or a no. Yeah, I'm very much a face-to-face presenter, so I can present online very well, but I love to sort of just see the reaction, so I can then, yes, okay, if you're agreeing, I can keep on that line. If no, please put something in there, because this is very much a sort of discussion. And look, I obviously, it's a Moodle moot, it's an iMoot. Crap, missed cue. I know my next job now. I'm not going to say that Moodle's rubbish, nor am I going to say that it is lacking per se. But I would have to say, if I got Hong Kong U to the point where their teaching and learning agenda was defined by connectivism, don't think we would be resting our laurels on Moodle. We would be looking very seriously, for example, at a whole host of technologies that would much more easily facilitate teaching and learning, accessing knowledge, replicating knowledge, sharing knowledge, communication on the fly, all of these things. Okay. Well, I'm glad at least I've got some yeses, because otherwise I'd be the keynote who really annoyed people and said Moodle was rubbish. How good would that be? Shane would never ask me back. So these are my closing comments. So we'll have about 10 minutes, which I wanted to leave, but I'm very glad. I mean, you've been a great, yes, I would. Thank you, Shane. You've been a really great audience interacting. So I did leave 10 minutes for chatting, and you've chatted away very well during this. So these are the points I want to make today. We need to rethink the learning theories we're using. I don't think it'll happen. Our institutions are inherently conservative places that have at the moment no desire What's missing in Moodle? Good question. We can talk about that after I've summed up. Yep. We need to rethink that. We need to rethink, in virtue of that, we need to rethink the technologies that we're using in our teaching. I want to say, despite the LMS naysayers, Moodle has clear utility as one technology in a connective environment. And I do not mean by that simply it's a good place for people to go because they feel safe and there's content there. Moodle has some really rich functionality. I think of things like the database function, which one of our architecture teachers used so that he could send students out photographing architectural oh God, I'm just going to say objects, at 6 o'clock on a Friday, architectural objects, and then they use the database, they populate the database with, fields around what is the object, why is it architecturally important, who was the architect, what significance does it have in the history. I mean, there are great tools in there that can be used really, really creatively. The issue lies with teaching and learning commitment, and will MOOCs, I was clearly on a bit of a roll then. MOOCs will likely make institutes focus on their teaching and technology use. I don't know why I said it will likely. I think I was hedging my bets. I'm going to say for the majority of them, I'm not sure. I'd be a fool to say at this stage in the MOOC landscape that I know what impact they're going to have, but I can see this playing out. I can see this playing out as a consortium of the top universities offering a joint degree, a joint MBA around the world, and absolutely scuppering the MBAs at the middle and lower tiers. That would be one way it could go. I can see a joint consortium offering a whole range of degrees. I can see them partnering up with business and offering high quality degrees in that way. It all in the end, I would say, I tell you what I think I do know. I think it's going to come down to certification and student identity and employers taking the qualifications seriously. If we ever get to the point where an employer actually looks at the graduates, say, or the people who have gone through informally through these courses, and then with edX gone because they now have teaching and learning centers, they have examination centers, so they've solved the identity issue. If employers really start going, wow, these people are as good as people who've done a 4-year degree, I think some universities are going to be in trouble. Happily not Hong Kong U. So, staying at Hong Kong U for a while. I'm kidding. We're there. We're in the space. We're in there for a lot of reasons. But I think for Hong Kong U or any really top university not to be in that space looking at what's happening would be a mistake. So let me finish there because we do have 10 minutes. I thank you for your time, and I do thank you for being a really good audience because I thoroughly enjoyed presenting to you and seeing your chats going on. So I'll stop, and I don't know if Shane wants to manage the mic or do it by chat. Or Shane might be having a cup of tea somewhere. He's not even listening to me. It's a shocker. He's gone off.
Oh, yes, I am. No. People can grab the mic if they want and ask questions, or in the chat. I'll leave that with you, Ian.
Yeah,
I'm happy. Everybody
Yeah, please use the mic because my typing skills are pretty average. What's missing in Moodle? Okay, I'll just throw them off. I'll throw them off the top of my head because I was going to think too hard about it. I know that you can integrate Mahara into Moodle, but our experience at Hong Kong U and also back in my other university of Auckland, that the students didn't find Mahara to be a sufficiently versatile and customizable for them. I think any LMS these days needs to have a much more student-centric, customizable interface in which they can all create their own spaces, in which they can move content around between courses from years, create their own navigation systems, create their own user groups. I think that's what's missing, is the personalization in the sense of both the environment, the services, and the taxonomies. The second big thing I think that is missing is a mobile interface that is predominantly focused towards instant communication and sharing. Let me say that. That's my opinion. I think those are two of the big things. But honestly, there's people here who knows a ton more. What if somebody has a comment on that? I'd be glad to hear it. Yeah, the student stuff in Moodle once they leave the institution. Well, the answer is the stuff is in Moodle for our institution. Yeah. Yeah, the Moodle mobile theme I know does it, but I just want a little app. And I'm sorry, the one I saw today was so good. This developer who's just come out of Silicon Valley where he had 6 months startup, and he basically sits an interface over the enterprise systems and talks back to the student information system and the LMS. Talk one way from that into the system, but it's basically point click. I want to talk to my mate, text in the chat. I want to have a voice chat with them. Click the little icon. There you go. I've got my mate from my group and I'm talking to them. I think mobile is so crucial these days. Play.google.com. I'm not up with the Moodle mobile apps at the moment. I thought that they weren't at the moment viable. So we're on the kind of mobile Moodle interface. Is that right? I think they were having problems. The app was EduAura. So if you go to EduOra, I'll type it in for you. It's a very interesting startup. There we go, eduaura.com. So the guy's back in, he's working in San Francisco. Now he's moved from, he's originally Indian, Silicon Valley, smart cookie. Now he's over in San Francisco. Moodle developing a mobile app with HTML5. Thank you, Nikki, one of my team. Okay. Not replacement. It's designed to take advantage of the phone and then link with Moodle. I'd be very interested to see what it's doing. Yes, because it's the social. If I went back to connectivism and I think when I'm on me for an example, but you could. When I'm on the fly, what do I generally do? I don't have time for in-depth study. Usually I'm grabbing, I'm emailing, I'm talking, I'm websiting, I'm downloading resources. An interface to Moodle, and my Moodle that's customizable, an interface that let me do what I do on the fly, on the bus, in a cafe, in a taxi, standing, waiting, would make a significant change to the way in which I operate. And it would be for the better. And it would be, in my opinion, sell to teachers, because for them it's all about time. For students, I think, somebody raised the student perspective. I'm still reading your chat. For students, I think it would be simply about how does what we do fit into their lifestyle? Yep. Yep, I fully agree with that, Julian. I mean, hopefully that I got that across, that you teaching approach necessarily leads to it's technology's neutral. Obviously you can be a behaviorist and you can make use of Moodle. You can be wholly social constructivist and make use of Moodle, or you can adopt a connectivist philosophy and realize that in your teaching approach. I very much love a model by, I think it's Peter Jones, an article in 2007 in the Australian Journal of Technology, where he simply takes the constructive alignment diagram and then sticks technologies underneath. It's awesome. Yeah, I fully agree. We want all of our people to have a stock of knowledge. It's a nonsense if any of us reflect on what we do. We don't go into meetings, and I don't come here hoping to wing it through making a whole bunch of connections, or indeed through, that's an interesting one. I don't, because of the nature of what I'm doing. Even if I came here and this was set up as a discussion, I still have to have a stock of knowledge in my head. Definitely. Gareth, I think that's a very good comment. And I think you're absolutely right. I would take no issue with that. I think for where our institutions are with their teaching and learning, and indeed where they will be in, for the next few years, Moodle is utterly brilliant, right? I've seen such creative uses of it within this institution. It is wholly an institutional stroke teaching issue. But Gareth, I guess what I would say to you then is, as we move forward into the future, how you see, what would be the role of Moodle then, and will it still fit? Excuse me. I'm remembering, Stam S's article on 2 metaphors of learning and the dangers of choosing just one informative in view of today's session. Sorry, can't quite follow that. W.L. Wong. Happy to talk to the point, but just not quite sure of the meaning there. I wonder if it's referring to having one particular perspective, and certainly today I put forward one particular perspective, and I thought about it, and I guess I see the role of a keynote is to put something out there, stand strongly behind it, and see what people make of it. So it was very much a perspective, if that was the comment.
Now unmuted. Oh, Iain.
Yes.
I was really, I was really kind of sort of commenting in relation to what you had pointed out earlier, that you would like to have your surgeon or your doctor having that knowledge in his head. It's not just about knowledge in places. And so I thought the SARF article sort of gave me remembering it, and I put it out there that people might want to read it, and maybe we can have a chat further on it. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So yes. Okay. No. Thank you. Yeah. Absolutely. Today, exit class minimums told the big 3 pedagogy is all flawed. You knew it was 3. Oh no, we could have a long discussion about essentially, I think, related to Bloom's taxonomy. Yes, I open up this discussion at 6:04. Are today's 3 big pedagogies flawed? No, I think flawed would be excessive. I think one chooses one, whatever you want to call it, teaching philosophy or pedagogical approach in terms of the learning outcomes, obviously. And in some cases, a behaviorist drill and practice one may be the way to go. Medics do very well in terms of learning anatomy and physiology through just being drill and test. And a lot of doctors would argue there's no way around that. They need a basic knowledge, and the best way to do that is through a behaviorist approach of drill and practice. If we're getting on to, let me try and think of an example that's going to make sense to people. where would constructivist, so a social constructivist viewpoint be important? Where are you really going to see manifest the idea? And I think my understanding of constructivism is about more than having different ideas. It's about having different emotions, attitudes, dispositions, beliefs, prejudices, etc. I find this interesting when we teach people. So if I say, well, social constructivism, people bring all that to bear. If you talk about something controversial like, off the top of my head, you know, the Holocaust, you're going to see some very, very different perspectives from people, and that's not because they have different knowledge, it's because they're different people, and it's important to learn and be open to all of those. So I don't think I'd say they're flawed. I think I would say that they have a particular place according to the sorts of outcomes that one wants to achieve. Continuum medicine, it's good. We wouldn't like to have surgery by a doctor who's learned it his own way. No, that's very, very true. How do you find cultural learner attitudes educated? How do you find cultural learner attitudes learning Hong Kong different to New Zealand? Natalie, look, I think one has to understand. I will give you an example. I've just been asked to go on a trip, an interviewing trip to mainland China, where Hong Kong University gets 12,000 applicants from mainland China each year, and we take 300. I don't know the figures for applicants for within Hong Kong, but if you imagine from that 300 out of 12,000, that will tell you about the type of learners that we get within Hong Kong. And people who are taught in the Australasian context or the British context will bear this out. There is an intensity here that is unbelievable in terms of achievement because of the high value that is placed on education and because of the expectations that families have. I mean, all families have expectations, but they are particularly acute in the Hong Kong context. And there is, look, I don't know this would be a difference. I couldn't honestly, I know it's to be I could say I would describe the learning style in Hong Kong as one of being relatively passive. So students are very comfortable with the sage on the stage model. Yeah. But I don't know to what extent I would say, well, how different is that from New Zealand? There's still a lot of that goes on. Definitely the intensity is different here. What about the idea that our eye devices are extensions to our brains? Speakers comment at the conference. Is that connectivist? Yeah, I think sometimes I have these weird glitchy moments in my head and I think about things like the Matrix, but has anyone ever had that feeling of being caught when you're just wandering along with this device as a natural extension of your body, either with a smartphone or a tablet? And it's almost as if it's not there. And when that happens to me, I suddenly flick into the future and can readily imagine this actually being a part of my body. Now, I know it sounds extreme, and yes and no. I don't think so, actually, in 20 years' time. But yes, I see these things are actually, yes, they are a physical embodiment of an aspect of connectivism. Yeah, there you go. What is that movie I saw recently where the guy... Oh, the remake of the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, Total Recall. And he thought, if anyone's seen that, he does have the phone it's in the palm of his hand, and he cuts open his hand and he just peels it out, but it's actually an implant. And yes, I can see that happening. And I don't know, you know, pie in the sky. When futurists, I think, no, I'm not a futurist. They're much trendier and seem to know a lot more about the future. But you know, you just think into 10 years' time, and what would a connectivist philosophy mean, and how might we be going about our teaching, our learning, and our ongoing, our lifelong learning? What might that look like in 10, 15, 20 years' time? Yeah, such huge changes in a short space of time. If you think, sometimes it stuns me because I'm old enough to remember when the internet started, and indeed when I had to go and fill in an interlibrary loan form and wait 2 weeks to get a journal article. Yeah, I'm not drinking beer because I'm on camera. Maybe it's off. Every time you see me do that, you thought I was just not very good with my camera. I've actually got a straw and a glass of wine down there. Yeah, no, it's things have changed at an absolutely incredible rate. Yeah, and they will again. I think Shane would tell you it should be a mojito. Noon here in Stockholm, so you can grab a beer. Nice. Oh, noon in Stockholm, very nice. I visited Stockholm, it's beautiful. Long time ago, utterly beautiful. Well, people, it's 6:15 in Hong Kong, and the bar is definitely beckoning for me. So, look, if you're, I'm around. I've set up a discussion forum. My PowerPoint is on my page. Actually, a very interesting visual representation of the future of educational technologies. Yeah, you're all very welcome. Look, it's always a pleasure, and you have been a really good audience. And I've really enjoyed presenting, and I've enjoyed your questions. Yeah. Yep, you're very welcome, Stuart. Yep. All right, people. Well, I'll sign off and go and have my Friday night, mandatory one glass of wine before an early night.
Hey, let me just quickly jump in and say, I think you can see it all, but thank you very much, Iain, for just spending your time. And yeah. It's a good indication of a great presentation when you're generating a lot of questions and a lot of chats. So you can see it flying through there.
It was great, Shane.
So thank you very much on behalf of the whole iMoot team.
Yeah, no worries.